I'm looking for something like this for my bow drill set, and I can get a number of bow drill sets out of this. And I like to get, anytime I'm doing a bow drill, I like to get 2 at a time. I don't like to have one set, because if there's something wrong with that, I could cut it open and it'd be, you know, eaten through with bugs or something to that effect. So I like to get 2 in case one doesn't work. Then I don't have to go all the way back out and harvest a second set. What I like about this particular piece is it's on the underside of a down tree, so it's dead and it's been dry and seasoned, and it's also underneath the main portion of the tree, so that's been protecting it from the elements a little bit. So better chance of getting a good dry piece of cedar to make my friction fire set from this. So I'm going to take one from here, and then probably further up the tree I'll take another section that looks good. That way I've got 2, you know, basically I like to get about a 1 foot section that's about, you know, 4 fingers in diameter. So that's about right. But I'll probably take it from up here a little closer. We'll see what it looks like when we get into it. Na 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 na. I'm gonna take my time. Well, I'm a rolling soul these days. I'm gonna take my time. Mostly heartwood, but a decent section. They haven't home and they don't know why. They in such a hurry and they miss the sky. They ought to look around. It's true. Yeah, so this is some really good shaggy bark that it's letting go. And this can be broken down into those smaller pieces, more fine pieces. So I'm gonna get as much of this as I need. So I get this Sammy pouch full. That's about what I need for a good tinder bundle. I'll find a little more bark, top this thing right off. That's going to be a pretty good size. But I got the blue skies and I feel in the rain, and I ain't gonna hurt from this world of a pain. Another great thing about the cedar is the branches tend to grow in a curved fashion, so they make a really good bow for themselves also when you're making a bow drill set. So you can get your tinder, your bow, your hearthboard, and your spindle, even your bearing block. You can get all of that out of the cedar. So this branch is about as big as I would possibly go for a bow, because you think about it, this is part of a machine and you're the engine. So the heavier this is, the harder it is to keep it steady, keep it straight, and you can input some variables into that friction fire set that you don't want to. So it wouldn't go much bigger than this, but this will work fine. They can be straight or curved. I do like a natural curve to them, and it needs to be reasonably, you know, a reasonably hard piece of wood. All right, you don't want something that flexes a lot, because as you're driving, you know, putting mechanical input into that, what you don't want it to do is flex instead of transfer that forward and back motion into, you know, spinning that spindle on the hearthboard. So it needs to be reasonably hard, but it can all be the same material. That doesn't matter. There's always that, you know, kind of conventional wisdom that you need a hardwood spindle and a softwood base, or vice versa. And I will tell you that that's a myth. Okay, I would say 98 to 99% of all my bow drills that I've ever done have always been out of the same piece of wood. All right, and if you think about it critically, then it does make sense. You're producing fine dust and heat from the friction of the wood, and you're grinding off basically small little bits, a little powder from both ends of the wood. So if the wood, say cedar for example, is good for the spindle because it has those properties, then it has those same properties for the hearthboard. So what I found is, while it does work if you use a hardwood with a softwood in any combination, there are a lot of combinations that does work with, but I found that if you use the same piece of wood, you're removing material by friction from the spindle and the hearthboard at about the same rate, and you can fill that notch with that dust that you're looking for much more efficiently. If you do kind of a hardwood spindle with a softer wood hearth board, then you're going to be wearing away a lot more material in the hearth board than you are the spindle, and vice versa. If you're using a hardwood base and a softer wood spindle, then you're going to wear the majority of the material away from that spindle. So I like to kind of even it out, and it tends to work out really well. So while you can do it that way, it is absolutely not a rule. I do most of mine with just the same piece of wood. But anyway, I like to do my bows in a certain way, because one thing that I've found through lots of failures at learning to do friction fires is one thing that you mess with a lot is retightening the string that you put on your bow, restringing it. And over time I figured out that I would probably spend 10 to 15 minutes fixing it if I didn't get the bow drill cold the first time. I spent a lot of time fixing that when I could have just spent a little more time, a couple of minutes up front, to kind of make this in such a way that I don't have that problem. So what I like to do is a pot hanger notch, or a bail notch if you want to call it that. It's kind of like something for that bow drill string to recess into and not come undone. All right, so then from there, I like to, down here, I like to do a simple hole through, all right? And to reduce the width of the material that I have to bore through with an awl, I'll do a saddle notch on both sides and kind of make that a little bit thinner, so I don't have to spend so much time drilling through to get that hole that I'm looking for. The other thing that does is whenever I go through that hole, that holds it really tight, and I got to recess with that saddle notch to wrap the excess cordage around in, and that keeps it from sliding back and forth. And I found that just makes it easier to tie. It takes 1 minute per notch, we'll say 3 to 4 minutes before you get started, but it saves you 10 to 15 when you're doing your actual bow drills, because you're not going to have to stop and keep fixing the cordage. So that's just my personal preference for those. And I like to just use bank line because the bank line is tarred. This is tarred mariner's line, also known as bank line. I like this over paracord because the paracord sheath is nylon, and it tends to kind of start sliding as the wood polishes a little bit. And the bank line is actually a twisted, so it has some texture already, and then it's tarred on top of that, so it's kind of sticky, and it really grips the spindle really well, and I think you get a lot less slippage, so I prefer bank line for this. But what I'll do is just take that bowline and I'll slip that over, and then it'll catch in that recess. Then I'll come down to the bottom, and I'll take the end of my cordage and I'll go through that hole through, just like I'm threading a needle. And I'll pull that excess through. So that gives me a positive place for that cordage to stay. Then what I'll do is I'll kind of tighten it to what I think it needs to be. I'll start coming around. The first time I come around, I'm going to come towards the inside of the bow, and that's going to create a half hitch kind of around where it comes out of the hole. I'm going to kind of lock that down. Now I'm just going to continue around that way several times, and I'm trying to keep those cordage wraps within those saddle notches so that it has less of a chance of coming undone. And I don't want a lot of tail hanging out there flapping, but I want to leave myself enough to just kind of do 2 half hitches. All right, I'll come back around, go back through itself, tighten that down, come back around a second time, go back through itself, create that second half hitch. And really what you've created is a clove hitch, because 2 half hitches opposing each other creates a clove hitch. If you want, you can put a stopper knot on there to kind of keep it from coming undone. For the stopper notch, just a simple overhand, make a loop, come around, come back through. That'll kind of lock up against that clove hitch if this starts locking or starts loosening up. And that's basically my bow, right? It's about the length of, my armpit to my fingertip. That's about a good size for me. So set that to the side, but that's how I do my bows, and I think the reason that I do it is because it's a lot less time fixing this. It's one of those, you never have enough time to do it right, but you always seem to have enough time to do it again kind of things. Like, I want to be able to do this once, knock out my coal, and continue on. So a little bit of work up front can save you a lot of work in the end. So that's the bow. And I could make I could make a spindle, or I'm sorry, a bearing block out of the same wood, out of the cedar, but I'd have to do a lot of maintenance on that because it's going to wear away at the same rate as everything else is. And I don't want the friction up top, all right? So a lot of times you get about halfway through and right before you make the coal, you have to do a little maintenance on the top of that. I personally have no problem doing that. It's something that you can do. Do you have to do that every time? No, I don't think that you do. It's good to make sure that you know how to do that, but you know, if you have other things that you always have with you in your kit, then that are set up to kind of make things easier on you while you're enjoying yourself out in the woods, then you should do it. This is my custom fire steel, which was made for me by a guy named Patrick Farnman up in Washington State. He's a blacksmith. It's made out of an old file, and it has wood scales, but this is my fire steel for flint and steel, traditional flint and steel fire. And it also has a machined bow drill divot in it that I can use as a really comfortable bearing block. So this is a dual purpose kind of multifunctional item that's always in my fire pouch, always on my belt. The chances of me not having this is pretty slim. And again, that's for me. And I can also, if I didn't have this, use a natural bearing block. There's a number of things you can use, but for me, you know, this just is a nice piece of kit to have. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to use that for my bearing block. And from there, I'm going to turn this single piece of red cedar into my hearth board and 2 spindles. All right, I'll only need one if we're lucky. I'll only need one, but I'm going to get the entire rest of the bow drill set out of this one piece of cedar. So I'm going to split this down. And I'm going to carve a couple of spindles. I'll probably carve 1 spindle and have 1 piece set aside so that if that one starts to get, you know, down and I haven't gotten the fire, haven't gotten a coal yet, I've got another spindle. I could use my knife and probably baton this, but this is kind of wide for my taste. You know, you should never expect that you would be able to baton a piece that is, you know, almost as wide or almost as long as your knife is. This is almost as wide as this is long. So once this actually gets down in there, I'm going to be hitting on the very tip of the knife, and that's just not a good idea. You want to have, you know, quite a bit of knife left on the other side that you're going to be hitting on. Otherwise, you're really going to take a chance of breaking the tip off. So this is a lot wider than I would typically use for my puko. My puko is something just over 4 inches, and I'm not comfortable batoning that. If nothing else, I could baton a wedge off and split it that way, but I've got an axe with me. So what I could do is what I call contact splitting, where for contact splitting, I'm not driving this down through in order to split it, all right? I'm actually going to set it, I'm going to put it in contact with the wood, and I'm going to use it more like a wedge and use a baton to actually drive that down through. So it's just like batoning your knife, but you're batoning your axe down through. And a lot of folks, I never see doing this, but it is a valid technique, especially for this particular one from Council Tools, because this actually has a hardened pole on it. So it's designed to be used just like a hammer would be. So there's no problem batoning this through, and you shouldn't have any problem batoning any axe. You know, but when you're batoning and making fireboard sets, it should be a medium to soft wood. So, you know, batoning a hardwood doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But I'm going to use that. But I'm actually going to back up here a little bit because I don't want to do this sitting while I do this initial split. But I'm looking at this wood, I'm looking for some natural cracks that are already occurring, and I want to split it basically right in the center. And I want to do it in such a way that once this splits, I always want to make sure I know what my follow through is. It needs to be away from me, not back down towards myself. All right, and of course, with any luck, this will go straight down and go straight in to the anvil. So I'm going to cheat towards the front side of the anvil.
one.
A little bit of contact splitting, and I've separated that out to where I have, you know, a reasonably good start towards a flat hearth board. And I've got the other half, I've basically got 2 blanks that I can carve into spindles. I'll choose the best one, start with that. It's probably pretty similar. I think I'll probably go with this one. I'm just going to carve those down. So everything from here is just me shaping this into the shape it needs to be. I'll use the axe for some, use the knife for some, and then of course shaping the spindle.
Na 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 na, na 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 na, na na na, gonna take my time. Na 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 na, na 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 na, na na na, gonna take my time. Do 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 do, do do da, ba do ba 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 da 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 da. Did it bump? Good at the town, down, down, na 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 na, na 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 na, na na na, gonna take my time. Well, I'm a rolling slow these days. I'm gonna take my time. Everybody moving on so fast. Well, watch them rolling down the streets, they nasty. They heading home and they don't know why. They in such a hurry and they miss the sky. They ought to look around, it's true. Na na na, na na na, na na na. Well, it seems like this world is a hurting. Everybody is a rushing and cursing. They can't find their hearts and stones. They lost inside their cell phones. We find it hard, but you know it's true. Na na na, gotta take our time to choose. Na 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 na, na 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 na, na na na, gonna take my time. Na 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 na, na 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 na.
All right, so I hacked out my hearth board here real quick, and for me, I just like about, you know, thumb thickness on that. That's plenty wide enough, and I like to kind of think of it as almost a dimensional lumber, just to keep it nice. But you know, the reason I want it flat is because I want it to sit flat on the ground and not have a lot of rock in it. So I'll plane that kind of down and kind of plane that edge. But what I like about using one that's at least, you know, 4 inches in diameter is I can actually keep this set and keep using it. You know, whether I'm still out here and I still want to keep using it, or if I want to practice with this, I can keep this set and I can get multiple holes all the way down here, probably 5 to 6 on each side. So this kit is good for several fires, and the spindle may wear out, but I still have the other half that I split off that I can carve into a spindle again. So maybe this spindle makes it all the way down this way before it wears out, and the other one all the way up this way. But either way, I'm able to take a nice piece of cedar that I've harvested, and if it's a successful kit and a proven kit, then I'm going to keep using it. You know, I wouldn't throw this away any more than I would throw away a lighter that still had fluid in it. It just, I wouldn't. So that's about the size I like to have. And carving it from the same piece, you know, allows me to kind of go with that, you know, 8 to 10 inch piece, and that's about the size that I found that I like to have for my spindle. They're carved from the same piece, they're about the same length, they're carved down to roughly the same width, so that's what I found works really successful. The last piece that I want to talk to you about is what I call the welcome mat, the catch pan. All right, this is what you're actually going to catch your ember with and actually transfer it over into your tinder bundle. So just one of the larger shavings is all I'll do when I'm making this kit, is I'll kind of reserve one of those for my catch pan, and that kind of rounds out my kit.